Hello and welcome to another episode of SoFly. It is October, and we're recording another episode here. It's fall, and it's pretty awesome. My name is Mitch, and we've got Aldo.
Hello, everybody.
And he's cracking himself a Muskoka Veer. Delicious. Delicioso. I like the lime lager. It's my favorite one of the Veers.
It's pretty tasty. One.
How the heck are you? You were just in Oregon. Welcome back with the
I'm good,
Reddington
man.
crew.
Yeah. I'm good. I'm maybe a little surprisingly jet lagged, and I say surprisingly because it's only a 3-hour difference. But I woke up this morning at 10:30.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you guys were doing lots of stuff. You were up every day early, right?
That's true. These things are true.
And then you went to bed late, I imagine?
Maybe a little bit, yep.
So burn the candle at both ends is what we call it. And
yep, we might have.
It's bound to catch up with you, and it's gonna tire you right out. It's gonna tuck you right out.
We might have got a little excited at night.
Well, you're tuckered, and that's to be expected because you had lots of fun. That's a good sign.
Yeah, it was a good sign, and maybe we could chat about it after our interview. But it was just Central Oregon is a wildly beautiful place.
I like that a lot. Yeah, let's chat about that after we chat with the after we have the interview, which we have coming up for you, is with Brian of Skeena Lodge. Brian, of course, is an amazing angler and also a heck of a guide and a very nice fellow, as we learned.
Yeah, there's you mentioned it while we on the show. I don't think one show is going to be enough with Brian.
Yeah,
because there's his life encompasses, his fly fishing life encompasses so much. Like obviously the steelhead angling, and then running the lodge, and then he's got the In the Bucket podcast. He's got he's an instructor, he's a guide. It's like, whoa, that was enough to take up our episode. But we definitely would love to have him back on to talk about the Skeena. And specifically the ecosystem, because that'll take up a whole show. Like, man,
100%.
What a great show. I really enjoyed talking to Brian.
Loved it. It was great. I liked it too. Of course, we have one problem in the show, which is a bit of an internet thing. It's funny because when we were recording, Brian's power actually went out, which messed up his internet connection. And so we had a little bit of lag between us, but for the most part, it's good in the show. You might just sometimes hear us respond to Brian because we heard him later. So how it lines up, it's like he says something and then he's like talking. We're like, right on. Yeah. And then he's like still talking. So there's only a couple moments like that. It's, I've done much correction, but it was a great chat. And that was only halfway through the show. So anyways, if you hear any weird responses from us to Brian, it's because our internet lag. It's not because we were like, I don't know, drunk or something, acting funny. But yes, very fun show. Brian, very nice dude. And we would definitely like to do more with him. Before we get into the show, though, why don't we chat a little bit community stuff?
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I've got to start with, we all got some very sad news last week on Wednesday, and passing of Colin McKeown, which, of course, the founder and host of the New Fly Fisher, and of course, very influential for me and Mitch because, well, he grew up where we grew up. In fact, he kind of grew up down the street from Mitch and would go to Mitch's fly shop.
Yeah, same street we lived on.
Really sad news, obviously. I don't think, well, I know I didn't know that he had cancer even, so it's amazing.
I didn't either.
Kept that show going. And if you look at, we had Bill on the show earlier, and, Bill's very public about his struggles with Parkinson's, and it's awesome that the both of them kept the show going and through their own personal struggles. And of course, all the best to Colin and his family. But, I just wanted to take a minute to recognize, I think somebody from the Isaac Walton Club commented on our tribute photo, and he said he was a quiet icon. And I really like that. I think that's, for someone who's been so prominent in our lives, he wasn't like this outlandish, always in your face kind of character. I like that quiet icon is that's very Canadian, I think.
Totally, yeah. He's a humble dude. And he was just that, I think he was just like genuinely a nice guy, So it's like, he wasn't super loud and in your face about anything. He was just like just a nice guy. And he was really fun to hang out with. And I'm really glad we got to that one day because, yeah, like you say, like he lived down the street from me. I used to see the New Fly Fisher Explorer cruising around Stittsville all the time, which was super cool because we'd watch it on TV, right? And then I'd see that. I was like, oh my God. But to have that chance when we got to hang out with him at Timmins, I think was awesome. And then COVID hit, obviously, and we had planned for a long time to fish together. You know, that was that was a dream. That was a goal. And Colin had mentioned it. He's like, we got to hit the water. I'm like, hell yeah, we do. So yeah, it's too bad we didn't get a chance to fish together because he was awesome. And yeah, condolences to the whole McKeown family and everybody. That's a tough one. But cheers to Colin because yeah, he definitely inspired so many people and was I think a great symbol of the Ontario fishing kind of person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. I always was two things I remember from meeting him in Timmins, which was funny because like it was me and Yelma sitting at the hotel bar, and he was at a table with like a buddy of his or whatever. And I remember all three of us were like, "Should we go over there, say hi, or
Yeah.
or is that weird? Is that weird if we go over there and say hi? We're the only ones here."
Yeah.
And then he goes, "Hey, are you guys gonna come over and say hi? Or are you gonna keep being weird?" And I was like, "Okay." We went
All
over
right.
and
Hey.
like-
Yeah, he broke the ice so perfectly.
Yeah.
Which was awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. And then obviously we spent our time together in Timmins, but it was fun watching him and Yilma, like him giving Yilma casting tips was like, it was awesome. Like that whole scene was amazing.
I know. And then just getting to talk fishing stories that night and have a couple of drinks together and hang out too late. And then the next morning shuffle into that Explorer and head off to the Timmins Kayak Festival.
Yeah, that's right. He drove us. He was
awesome.
He was our ride. It's funny. We actually, I don't know, in a weird way, like, we recorded this episode with Brian.
Yeah.
About a week ago? Over a week ago?
A little bit over a week ago, yeah.
It's September 23rd right now. Obviously, this show comes out October 1st, but we even mentioned Colin in the show. And
yeah, he came up in the chat. Like, Brian had a memory of Colin. And yeah, like we talked in the show, we, like you say, recorded a couple weeks ago. We had no idea Colin, was sick or anything. It's funny that he came up like that, I mean, he's had such an impact on so many people. And he's had so many stories, like he's done so much in the fly fishing world. It's a life well fished, which is, amazing that he had all of those stories all across the country, all across the world, really.
Yep. Yeah.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you'll hear that section in the show, and we haven't edited it out or anything. It's, we weren't aware of anything at the time, but now I got to ask Brian about that story because Brian's like, I'm not going to tell you the story right now, but ask Colin about this, and so we got to ask Brian. Brian, what was that story? Maybe we'll message him after this.
Yeah,
but yeah, condolences and cheers, Colin, and the fam and the new fly fisher and everybody.
Then. Yeah, I don't really have much on the community end aside from that, other than, if you want to go to the Monster Mash.
That's right.
Which is the musky fly fishing competition.
It's coming up, eh?
It's coming up. You can check it out, the Monster Mash, on Facebook. That seems to be the place that has the most information. But yeah, it's a musky fly fishing musky tournament, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of stuff happening, gear demos and all that good stuff.
Yeah, it
sounds like fun. I think Drift is involved somehow. I just messaged Rob today just to see if he needs any help, because I wouldn't mind even just going, even just for the day, just to see what the heck is up with the Monster Mash. I love the name.
I think it's awesome.
I think it's so good. It's right near Halloween too. It's so good.
Yeah, it's so cool, man.
So good. But that's really pretty much it. Everything else, Ottawa Fly Fishers, the Forest City Fly Club, et cetera, they've all got their websites, and we'll put them in the show notes, but I don't think they have anything going on, at least that I can see yet, in October. Yeah, other than their usual monthly meetings and stuff, which of course, again, you can check out their websites to see that.
Monster Mash includes a pig roast at the end of the day. I mean, how can you go wrong with that? Try to catch some musky fish, have some fun, and then gather around and have a pig, eat a pig. That sounds awesome.
Have a pig.
Have a pig. Barbecue pig? Come on. Barbecue hog. A little bit of
honestly,
pork.
After especially
awesome.
If it's going to be a crispy fall day, you're just like chucking thousands of casts on an 11 weight.
Yeah.
A BBQ pig sounds pretty good.
Sounds pretty good to me. Well, there you go. Okay. Well, should we get into the show with Brian Niska?
Please. My God.
Okay. Here we are. Brian, interview right after these words. Brian Niska is a Spey casting instructor and guide. He runs a Riverside Wilderness Lodge on the Skeena River, aptly named Skeena Spey Riverside Wilderness and Lodge in northern British Columbia. Brian is a board member of the BC Fishing Tourism Association and is a certified two-hand master casting instructor and a master casting instructor. He's also the host of In the Bucket, a podcast that explores Spey fishing culture in the Pacific Northwest. But today, he is on SoFly. Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, right on, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Stoked to chat about the Skeena and the lodge and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, where are you calling in from? You're in northern BC, eh?
Yeah, I'm from Terrace right now, just hanging out here at the lodge, right on the banks of the Skeena.
Oh, nice. So you're like up at the lodge. You're up at the lodge right now.
Sitting in my office where we do fishing licenses.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's awesome. So it's like what kind of like part of the season are you in then? I guess is this sort of right in the middle of it all, or?
Yeah, we've got two main seasons. So we do March and April is our winter steelhead season, and our summer steelhead season runs from mid-July through to mid-late October. So we're kind of midway through right now. This being the start of September.
Oh, cool, rad. Okay, how's it going so far? Is it pretty good season?
Oh, it's been a great year. Yeah, lots of stuff on the airwaves about the return as they guess off it at Tyee Test Fishery, but the reality is we've had great conditions and lots of nice fish showing up.
Oh, that's great. I mean, yeah, like it's I know being out here, we always hear like the news coming from the West Coast, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but it's good to hear that it's a good year and things are going well.
Yeah, conditions when you're in this game fishing for steelhead, conditions are everything, and we've had good conditions combined with a good run of fish, and that's pretty much all you can ask for in this bit.
Sick. Hell yeah. Awesome. Okay, well, before we get talking, too much about Skeena, I guess, and all that that kind of stuff, why don't we talk a little bit more about your fly fishing life, who you are, how you got into fishing, how it started. So why don't we start there? Like, where did fishing begin for you?
Yeah, like earliest core memories. I kind of have this theory that some people are just born with this. It's like a gambling defect gene or something where they just want to be out fishing all the time. I've got a picture on my wall here. I don't know if if I'll screw things up.
No, go get it for sure.
There's a
or
picture of a young man there holding a rainbow trout. Not that well. That's me.
That's
and
awesome.
That was the first fish I ever caught, and that was in Okanagan Lake. We used to do a family trip there, fishing for kokanee. And the first one I caught was a small rainbow trout on a little tiny spin and glow trolled behind a boat. And I don't know, just always been pretty fascinated. It's always been a big part of my life and continues to be for sure.
So your family did this trip to this lake every year kind of thing?
Yeah, Okanagan Lake's a huge lake. Now, my family's into fishing. My interests surpassed, I think, they were casual anglers, right? But it was just a really fun trip that you recall as a 4-year-old. I'm 51 now, and it's crazy that I can really remember those days, those trips when I was like 4 and 5, and sometimes I can't remember what we did last Tuesday.
Yeah.
Oh God, I know.
I feel you.
So what a great way to get into it. I mean, like, yeah, you're living and you're breathing. I mean, obviously you own a fishing lodge, you're a guide and casting instructor, board member. Fishing is running through the veins. So then when did was that a fly fishing trip, or when did fly fishing enter your life?
Yeah, so my parents weren't fly fisher people. That's important to note. I remember so it's true. I remember the first time I saw someone fly fishing, I was kind of like, what the heck are they doing? So my parents, being supportive, went out and bought me my first fly rod. And I don't know where they got it. I do remember it was a 7/8 weight, which I used for trout. Yeah. And at that point, we were living in a place called Port Coquitlam, which is about 45 minutes east of Vancouver, if the traffic's not too bad. Mm-hmm. And we lived pretty close to this place called De Beauville Slough, which was it's just like it sounds. It's a slough off the west side of the Pitt River. And it was a Christmas present, that rod. This is another core memory. I think I was about 12, but I remember riding my bike down there on Christmas morning, pretty keen. And I had this little silver tinsel fly with a mallard wing, and caught a beautiful little cutthroat. That first day I had the fly rod, and I was literally hooked, as they say.
Yeah. And it's such a great place to learn how to fly fish, and being a kid and kind of like fly fishing heaven, you know? I mean, like there's some pretty good opportunities out there. Yeah? Like when you were a kid, saying you're just going to catch a cutties and everything else.
Yeah, BC's great for that. I mean, you know what? I'm learning more and more about Ontario. My wife's from Ontario. I've
Oh, nice.
never fished in Ontario, but you know, who knows? Maybe one day we'll do some fishing out there.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
you know, Ontario's full of water, lots of lakes, obviously, and it's
Oh
a
yeah.
big part of the culture. And BC's the same.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's a lot of cold water fishery. It's like a big cold water fishery, right? And I mean, you have such interesting, like Aldo and I always, talk about trout and stuff. We grew up in Ottawa, and it was mostly warm water stuff. But just like riding your bike to catch cutthroat, I mean, that sounds kind of like a dream.
Because I was riding my bike to catch a smallie,
Sunfish,
and I love
you know?
smallmouth bass. Don't get me
Oh
wrong,
yeah,
but there's a romance to trout, you know.
Yeah, especially that time of year, you know, being out in the winter in the snow, fly fishing. Yeah, that's always been pretty cool. And I think that's why winter steelheading's always had this special draw. In theory, nobody should be into winter steelheading. I mean, it's uncomfortable, it's cold, you don't catch much. Um,
Yeah.
Summer steelheading is a little different. You know, it's nice out, but you know, there's something about going outside to get really cold and wet, and then I think the comfort of coming back inside after, and then also this idea that you're just crazy enough to be out there doing it, and the majority of the people wouldn't be. And I think there's something there that resonates with a lot of people, because the folks that like winter steelheading like it a lot.
yeah, it's a good point. Eh? Like it's a type of fun that is kind of like we've talked about it before as being fun that you have fun after almost. Like during it's like this is fine, but then like after you're like that was awesome because you're like warm now and you're eating chili, you know.
Yeah. Well, actually, we just talked about it in our last podcast in the outro because, like, the way we set up the show now, it's after we have the guest on, we kind of do our like little what we've been doing lately kind of thing. And Mitch is just saying, with fall around the corner, we're looking forward to our little migratory
Time of year.
time of year, and doing the Great Lakes thing, and
It's such
yeah,
a vibe.
you're either on a raft or walking and waiting all day with snow driving in your face, but then you get home and you got the soup going, and I don't know, is it really
Awesome.
that bad? And that actually, you know what, Brian, I was listening to the In the Bucket podcast. Oh my God, we have so much to talk about today. But just really quickly, we've had I was listening to the In the Bucket the other day, and I think it was your first episode with you had I can only remember his nickname, Feet.
Yeah. Okay. So that was literally the first one I ever did. Okay. So the In the Bucket number 1 is just me and Dave. So In the Bucket is part of the Wet
Kind of
Fly
setting up
Swing
the
Network.
show, right? Yeah.
Yeah. That was
Yeah.
setting up the show. So that was the first one I actually did on my own. It's a multi-guest format. So on that show, you had Feet Banks, he's a writer, filmmaker, just all around legend from Whistler, Squamish. Pro skier named Kai Peterson,
Mm-hmm.
and another ex-pro skier named Riley LeBeau. All these guys are really into fishing, specifically steelhead fishing. And they'd come up and film a movie with us the previous spring. So we kind of had that to talk about.
Yeah.
Obviously friends with those guys too. So yeah, Feet's a character, man. He'd be a great guest on any show.
Oh, for sure. What I loved about that show specifically, was like, it wasn't, I mean, yourself aside, it wasn't necessarily like, who you would consider fly fishing heads. I mean, aside from like, obviously they're big in your community or whatever, but it was cool bringing in like pro skiers to talk about how much they loved fishing. I'm getting to the original point of why I'm bringing this up, because we were talking about being cold in the snow and whatnot. And you guys had a great conversation about exactly what we're kind of touching on right now, is like you got that camaraderie when it comes from like fishing in the snow together, you're building the fire on the bank, or you're having the coffee together. And then all of a sudden, because you catch less fish in the winter, all of a sudden any success is like the group's success. And that moment becomes such a big moment. And I really like that, because it's true. And then, you get all excited when you're, Mitch, to your point, you get excited when you get home and you've got that chili in you and you're like, man, wasn't it so sick when Brian hooked that fish and then we, Mitch was spilling his coffee all over himself, running to get the net. It all becomes those moments. And I think, yeah, if you like winter steelheading, that's kind of part and parcel. Anyway, not to divert the conversation, but yeah, winter steelheading's super fun.
Feet had a great quote in there talking about, a shared human experience between people, like you're saying. And yeah, I think that's a big part of it, man. And those guys, fished each of them, I think, got into steelheading much later in life than I did, and they came to it from other places. And that was, to me, that was kind of like the blueprint for In the Bucket, because I just want to have conversations with people that are into fishing, whether they're a 25-year experienced guide or some dude who just got into it. If they have neat stories, let's have a chat. And In the Bucket, we just, it's like sitting around at the bar at the end of the day. I'll tell you, the next episode that comes out, and depending on how much of a delay you guys have before publication, maybe it'll be out before this one, comes out on September 18th. And that is with Eric Jackson. People know him as E-Jack. He's a pro snowboarder. And Darcy Baca, who was our first return guest on In the Bucket. He did another episode in the Bucket number 4. And Curtis Cizik, who's just a true gentleman, a great professional snowboarder with a long career, but super passionate angler, and also a guide on the lower Deschutes. And I think to date, it might be my favorite one, because when you're doing the editing and you look at the sound wave from everybody and it assigns each of the guests a different color, if my color is like very small in there, then I feel like I've done a good job. And with those guys, the colors were really evenly spread. We just had a great natural conversation, went all sorts of places. And yeah, I'm looking forward to having more of those. It's a lot of fun. As you guys know, obviously, you guys have done like hundreds of these, haven't you?
176.
This will be 176.
Yeah.
Dang, that's a tremendous body of work.
Yeah, it's been a good haul. But,
it's been fun though, like you said. Like, it is fun,
Oh yeah.
I got to flip it around and ask you, what you guys got into podcasting pretty early in your fly fishing careers, right? So what was your motivation to get this thing started?
Well, I think like when we started it, I mean, at the time, how long had I been fly fishing for? I mean, both Aldo and I started fly fishing when we were kids.
I was 10 when I started fly fishing.
Yeah, and I was 13. And then we started this in 2016. We had Yilma, who was our other guy on here, who's brand new to it. I think the motivation for us when we did start was... how
old was I in 2016?
It was kind of the same thing. Like we just wanted to... Well, there's two things. One, we wanted to meet our fly fishing heroes and talk to people that we've looked up to or want to know more from, fisheries we don't know much about, whatever. And the other was to try to use it as a way to go fish in places that we probably never would be able to go fishing at. And both have worked out.
And also talk about Ontario as well,
and promote Ontario for sure,
because it's kind of funny,
it's
like
our place, our home.
You look at shows like The New Fly Fisher, and Colin's from the same town that Mitch just grew up. I grew up right in Ottawa. Mitch grew up outside of Ottawa in Stittsville, which is where Colin is from.
Down the street. We live on the same street.
And we didn't know that at the time, but before meeting him, and then, but they were definitely an inspiration, because like, I don't have to explain this to you. You crack open any publication, it's still to this day, but certainly back then when we were teens, fly fishing in Ottawa, it was all, you either saw stuff from the Florida Keys or you saw stuff from Montana. And so, except for The New Fly Fisher, it was like, all of a sudden there's a show on Outdoor Life Network and these guys are fly fishing in Northern Ontario.
Southern
I was
Ontario,
like, we thought that was so cool. And so, we were like, we can tell these stories too. But like Mitch said, meeting your heroes and also meeting the Canadian community too. For me anyway, I can say personally for me, I was really interested to talk to people from the East and the West Coast, because I've just never fished there. I'd never met anybody from there, or never really talked too much in depth. Like, we both grew up working at fly shops in our teens and early 20s, and you meet a certain amount of the community, but it was cool meeting the Canadian community, and of course then the global community is and learning from them and hearing their stories.
That's great to hear that The New Fly Fisher and Colin in particular inspired you guys. Many, many, many years ago, I did an episode with Colin, and this would have been winter fishing in Squamish. So we caught bull trout.
Oh, rad.
Nice.
Yeah, I got to guess at the year, but I bet you it was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of like 2003, somewhere in there.
Okay.
So it was a long time ago. And Colin's a great guy, and what a fantastic show. And what I loved about that show is his format, right? It's very, very unique and very relatable for the audience. But it's not always that relatable to watch a couple of like super experienced people catch a bunch of fish in a place that the viewer's never going to go. So I thought Colin did a great job with that show, and testament to it that that's such a long run with it. I'm not going to say the story here, but for your own personal enjoyment and to test his memory, you should ask him about our dinner at the Keg.
Were
Okay.
there lots of triple rum and cokes?
No.
Oh, okay,
No.
because there was when we were in Timmins with Colin.
It was a bizarre story, a funny thing, a memory, but yeah, I don't think he would have forgot it. You'll have to ask him.
We'll definitely
Okay.
ask him.
We'll
We
definitely
should-
have to
yeah.
ask him.
Yeah,
That's so cool. Yeah, I mean,
He's such
it's
a
so-
nice dude.
He's such
Oh,
a
he's
nice
a great
dude.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then I guess that prompts a question, like, because we went on a bit of a tangent there, but I think how, fly fishing comes into your life, fishing comes into your life, fly fishing comes into your life. From the outside looking in, it's pretty hard not to just be like, this guy just is steelhead and swinging flies. Like, when did that,
Yeah, after the cutthroat,
when did that kind of grab hold of your love of fishing?
Yeah, great question.
No pun
I
intended.
think some people get into fly fishing and they just do it all, right? Like multi-species, warm water, cold water, blah blah blah, the whole bit. I tended to take a different approach when I got into spey casting. I kind of just abandoned everything else, and I'd never done a lot of warm water stuff. I don't do that well under the bright sun, but I was really into lake fishing, like Kamloops trout lakes, like a lot of people in BC are, right? They're very well known for that. And once you get into steelhead, if steelheading is going to be your thing, you just want to be doing it all the time. And the reason you want to be doing it all the time is you figure out pretty quick. And there's a lot of parallels with, say, powder skiing, right? Like you can't ski powder every day. You got to watch the weather, pay attention to conditions. And if you're a steelheader, especially one who swings flies, you have chosen to make this fishing pretty unproductive. Generally, you're going to put a lot of hours in for a few fish here and there. So you want to spend as much time out there doing it as possible. And this is good advice, I think, for anyone who's into steelhead fishing. Go for as long as possible. And eventually you find you go for the whole season. You talked about a migration earlier, and I thought that was a really good comparison because there's something kind of primal about it, right? Like you guys talk about in the fall, you're going to get drawn to this fishery. In the spring, you get drawn to that. And I've listened to shows you've done in the past where you guys were, really excited about the trout opener, right? It's a big deal. And and here in this part of the world, there's this migration to Skeena country that happens in the summer, late summer. People just everyone comes from everywhere to be up here. And that's kind of neat. We see it at our lodge with guests. I've got folks here, a guy from New Zealand who comes every year, and other folks from the States and Europe, and they meet here once a year at that time. And, this goes bigger than just our lodge. This is all throughout Skeena country. People they don't want to miss it. So yeah, there's something primal, and it is a migration. You're correct.
Yeah. It's funny. I think now just reflecting on that notion of migration, a fly shop in Ottawa is not that busy. It just isn't, like, comparatively to the one here in Toronto, or I'm assuming VC. But when it was busy was, when people were gearing up to go to the Gas Bay, so all of I guess why I'm so excited to talk to you and why we were so excited, to get into, talk about steelheading is because most of my migratory knowledge is always, East Coast Atlantic salmon, which I can draw a lot of parallels, but you can't do the winter thing. That's the only difference, is there isn't that added level of
hardcore.
Of hardcore or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if I like the word hardcore, but like, well, you know what I mean? Like, it's not
Fishing in the winter.
It's fishing in the winter. Yeah. There is definitely some sort of an element of hardcore, but there's like an element of, I don't know. It's like people like winter camping, what's going on there?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but ice fishing is a big deal in your part of the world, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Especially to Mitch.
Yeah, it's pretty cold.
Yeah.
I mean, on a good day.
But it is something about getting outside in the snow, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry. Yeah, the swinging comes in your life. You've decided to, like you said, make life hard on yourself, and then you really embraced it because now, like, you're a guide, you're a spey instructor. Like, when did you decide to get into the when did guiding come in your life and lodge life and instructing?
Yeah, so skiing's always been a big part of my life, and I was a ski instructor as soon as I turned 16. That's a great job to have as a 16-year-old. And the certification process there, is really good training for teaching anything. And, as these sort of two passions going on in life, one skiing, one being fishing, fly fishing. So teaching fly casting was just a natural thing to do. And I got into what used to be called the Fly Fish Federation, the Triple F program. Now it's FFI, and got my single hand, got my master's, did the space stuff. But the teaching of casting kind of really turned into a business when I was working at a fly shop. As you guys know, you're selling people gear. They're pumping you for information. Where should I go? But they still don't really know how to use the stuff. And, pre YouTube, there were books and VHS videos, but I found I could make as much money in a couple hours after my shift teaching people casting as I could throughout my whole shift at the fly shop. And the fly shop was a very fertile ground to find customers. So yeah, I just really got into teaching, and guiding's a natural extension of that. As soon as I turned 19, I had a guide's license. Was lucky to get an opportunity to guide in Chile, which was,
Wow.
pretty formative for me with, understanding, the clientele that's out there. And when I was in Whistler for 12 years, Squamish for 4. And when I first moved to Whistler, I was teaching skiing, but Whistler's cool in the summer and you have to have a job. So I had a plan. I was like, golf, how hard can it be, right? I golf a little bit. I'll be a golf pro, right? So turns out golf's hard, and I'm probably better at fishing. So I basically got back into, to guiding in Whistler. And then that turned into, 12 solid years with a shop and a fly fishing school, and doing a lot of hosted trips and, guest instructor bits at a variety of lodges, which ultimately kind of led to where we are today.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Guest instructor, that's the first. Well, I mean, is it what it sounds like? People bring in
so I'll
and
give you
it's
a couple
"We've got
examples.
Brian,
So Alaska West, which is the Connecticut River. Years ago, they used to, during king salmon season, they would have a featured guest instructor each week. And I was fortunate enough to get to do a couple of weeks there each year. I did that for 7 years. And
Man, that's cool.
also, one of the lodges here in Terrace did a similar program, and I was part of that, and that's actually what led to purchasing a guide license and having the lodge up here. You got to remember, guys, like now there's a lot of good information out there for new spey casters, but at the beginning, it was tough because the gear was really developing. And my first spey rod was a 15-foot rod with a double taper line that was way too light for it. And I remember taking it to the Thompson River and being super frustrated because I was like, I could single hander. I can throw my 4-weight further than I could throw this giant piece of lumber. But learning stuff is fun, and progression is addicting, right? So you start to get better, then you start chopping lines and doing stuff, and all of a sudden you find your way to line systems that work well for the fisheries you're going to do. And I think if you were to trace back a lot of the developments, especially in spey, but all throughout fly fishing, a lot of the innovation is driven by, they're sort of regional to different fisheries. Perhaps you have something similar in your own backyard, right? People, they're trying to solve a problem. And in our situation, we knew how to access steelhead with, gear rods. Ed Ward, I think, was probably he's not the only one, but he was probably the originator of the true Skagit line and Skagit style of casting. Yeah. And that was because he was trying to figure out how to catch these fish, right? So the whole Skagit development and sustained anchor casting, that was a giant jumpstart for folks trying to use two-handers out here. If we didn't have that, if everyone was still trying to throw double taper lines, spey casting wouldn't be nearly as popular as it is because it's really hard to get good at that stuff. So, the technology was sort of based on the fishery, but the technology also drove the popularity of everything. And now, it really is true that the tackle that we have today, the learning curve is like an hour. I can take someone who's never seen this stuff before, and less than an hour, they're fishing effectively. And in the old days, that wouldn't have been the case.
Yeah, it's like more designed intuitively so that anyone can kind of do it.
Totally. And it's kind of come full circle because I don't know how technical you guys want to get into this, but the casts we're doing now with Skagit stuff primarily are not sustained anchor casts. They're touch and go anchor casts. So the same principles that Tim Arsenault used with a long belly line to win Spey-O-Rama this year is apply to how we throw Skagit stuff out here fishing for steelhead on the Skeena.
Yeah. Can you explain the difference, just because we said it a couple times, between sustained anchor and touch and go? I'm assuming you mean like a sustained anchor being more of like a double spay type of thing.
You betcha. A double spay is an example of a sustained anchor cast. That being said, there's a way to do a double spay with a touch and go anchor cast, but you can take all spay casts and look at what's in front of you and say, okay, that was a sustained anchor cast or a touch and go. So,
Right.
you know, the cast that everyone should aspire to is a single spay because it's the quickest, most efficient, and a single spay is a touch and go anchor cast.
Yeah.
Now, the closest thing in the sustained anchor world to a single spay is a parry poke. And so parry poke, you set the anchor kind of similar to how you would with a single spay, but instead of continuing on forward, you have this nice little pause and you just forward cast, or sorry, bring the rod down in a poke, essentially
Yeah.
dumping some line, allow yourself a really nice straight anchor. I apologize, guys. My phone's beeping because someone just caught a fish. You can edit this out, but I want to tell you,
Don't edit that out.
one of the most exciting things about having the lodge is the group chat with the guides, because someone will catch a fish and then they'll send you a picture and all the guides will say,
that's
"Ooh, that was great."
awesome.
So that's that beeping. Someone just caught a 17-pound steelhead, and that's a big deal. So that's why they're
Nice. Whoa.
Nice.
Sick.
and unfortunately my phone is tethered to the computer, so it's my computer.
Well, I
beeping.
didn't hear
No,
anything.
No, that's
so
fine.
that's okay.
That's also super cool though. Like, man, someone just had a big moment.
Yeah, no, this is it, right? And steelhead fishing is all about moments. You don't go up and go, "Oh, I caught 4 today." It's all about, I worked really hard and then I caught this really spectacular fish.
Totally.
So we were nerding out there talking about casting, and I just want to say one more thing about the parry poke. So
for sure,
there's a variety of casts that a spay caster can do, and the first consideration is, what's the wind doing? If the wind's blowing upstream, you want to operate on your upstream shoulder regardless of what side of the river you're on. Downstream breeze, same thing, only opposite. So if you think of it that way, to be effective and fish everywhere, at minimum, someone needs 4 casts, an upstream and a downstream shoulder cast on either side of the river. So the parry poke, that cast there is the quick way to get it to a single spay. And it's not the only upstream shoulder cast that someone could do. Circle cast, snap tees, that type of thing are very popular.
Yeah.
But if you think of it this way, spay casting should always be about efficiency, and the anchor and the anchor placement is the foundation of what you're trying to do. And if the anchor's in the right spot and the anchor's laid out nice and straight, you're going to have a hard time screwing up that cast. We generate load in the sweep. We make a nice transition at the back. Hopefully your D loop isn't losing a bunch of energy. You're not putting a bunch of slack in there by dropping your rod tip. And if you do that, great. When you go forward, it's just a situation of being patient with your power application. I always tell my students, no power before midnight. Think of bringing the rod to 12 o'clock and then trying to use your power. And the last thing we do is with our hands, right? So if folks are hitting it with their hands early, that's when you hear whoosh. The cast basically starts at your feet with weight transfer, to turning of the hips, bringing the core into it. And then when everything's lined up nice and straight, the last thing you get to do is pull with your bottom hand. And it's kind of similar to a golf swing. I'm not a great golfer, as I alluded to earlier, but if we go to the driving range and we hit a bucket of balls, some of them are going to look pretty good, and it's going to feel like I did nothing, because it's all about just being smooth. And you can't teach smooth.
It's hard, right? Yeah, like teaching fly casting is like, so that was obviously like a flurry of really cool tips and insights into your passion for two-handed casting. Would you say you prefer teaching single hand or double hand casting?
Oh, double hand. I teach maybe 10 hours of single hand a year, if that.
Right.
Like out of choice, or just like people aren't like, interested in learning that, they want to learn the double spit, or they want to learn two-handed rods?
Yeah, our clientele is pretty much exclusively two-handed, but there's a lot of folks that need to learn how to single hand for other fisheries. So, I still do a little bit of that work, but teaching spay casting is my primary gig.
Teaching casting is hard, man. Like, I've done it a few times, not as a pro caster, just like, friends and family and that kind of thing. And I'm like, just do what I'm doing. And they're just like this, and they like throw the rod. I'm like, what is happening right now? So, all the respect to you for, for the teaching thing. And obviously, yeah, it's cool. Sustained anchor cast. I've heard it said that way, but it's like, it's really interesting to hear that. And like all the deepness of, the casting terminology. It's cool.
You know what?
That's
I
cool.
didn't actually address your initial question. I thought I went on a big, long-winded rant there, but
No, it's good.
The simple way to explain it is a touch and go anchor cast. Timing is important. The line's going to land on the water, then it's going to be redirected out. Sustained anchor cast, we set the anchor. The sustained anchor, the anchor kind of becomes a pivot point. We turn the line off of that, so once it's in the water, it's not being moved around a ton, and so it allows the caster a little bit more time, to really think about what they're doing. So it's a good starting point, right?
Totally, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, just quick for our personal history, like I'd never really gotten into spey fishing. And then I met Mitch. And Mitch, had this amazing mentor with his uncle. His uncle builds bamboo rods, is obsessed with spey fishing and dry fly fishing. And him and his friends, or at least his friends, snorkel the creeks around here to understand the bug life. And, after meeting Mitch's uncle, that's what really obviously, Mitch, that's what got you into spey fishing, right?
Well, and hooking a steelhead. I was
Well,
like,
yeah,
okay,
that
that was cool.
but I'd never really even thought of it, and then I met these guys, and then everything we learned initially anyway about spey casting was from Uncle Joe, and then getting to cast his two-handed bamboo builds was pretty awesome. But it's a totally we use a lot of Scandi out here for sure. And then when Skagit came along, it was awesome too, but our rivers aren't anywhere near as grandiose as some of the water you're covering. But it's Skagit became pretty effective out here too. I found anyway.
So let me ask you guys: with the Scandi lines, are you fishing on the surface, or are you using poly leaders or light tips on there?
Kind of a mix of.
Well,
of
Mitch
everything.
will, much like Joe, only fish a dry line.
Well, there was a time, but now, not so much.
I'm using poly tips for sure. Yeah.
So I'll definitely use those as well. I think, like you said, you're going to put in as much time as you can. Swinging for steelhead down here, it can be tough. Hey, I've got fish on dry lines, and it's really awesome. And I love telling people that because it's sick. But increasing your chances is, I'm all for it because it's nice to connect with a fish too. But there's something just romantic about the double hand thing. I think for us, it is very much attached to
fall,
the fall, and just like that
change
cold weather,
season.
And it's just that whole thing. It's just such a nice subset of fly fishing, much like bamboo and dry flies are, or all kinds of little subcultures within fishing. But it's a cool one.
I love that culture of Kate and Scott. They're not weighting flies or using too many poly tips. It is fun going down there and swinging flies. Plus, they're both really great spey casters, and it's cool learning from them too. I guess the whole, like you were saying, I think I'm just echoing that sentiment of the romance of spey fishing. And then, but I will say, Brian, after hearing you chat about it and hearing Kate and Scott and some other adept spey anglers, it's nice that how do I put this delicately? Sometimes when I meet people who two-hand cast, they become so obsessed with just casting and kind of forget that they're fishing. And I find that after listening to your podcast, Brian, and obviously talking to you now and talking to people like Kate and Scott, their fishiness, when it translates to their spey fishing as well. Like they're thinking about how they're presenting, and how to actually hook a fish instead of just like, well, I've got my cast down and I'm just going to cross my fingers. Does that make any sense? I find that sometimes with spey fishing.
Yeah, you can kind of get into different rabbit holes, and some people really dig a deep one on the casting. I talked about my buddy Tim there earlier. He literally is the world champion right now. He won Spey-O-Rama. And Tim's a heck of an angler too, but he puts a lot of effort into, his cast and teaching casting. And the reality is, at least in our fishery, more distance doesn't equal more fish. In fact, a lot of times, at least on the Skeena, it works the opposite. So the fishiest guys that we take out, or gals, throughout the year are not the best casters. They're great casters, but they're not the best casters. But they're really good at fishing 65 feet of line. So they keep the fly where the fish is. I think if you really get just at the core of it, if you really get into casting, the fishing is what happens between the casts. And so you're naturally going to rush things a little bit. And I think with steelhead fishing, at least what we do, I think being really patient and allow the fly to swim right to the dangle, allow the fly to sit on the dangle even, that's going to equate to more bites over time. So the folks that are really good at presenting the fly and enjoy presenting the fly, and the casting is more of a means to the end. And it has to turn over. You need tension for the fly to work properly. But if you're really thorough with how you fish it, you'll catch more fish. If you're focused on, the next cast, you're going to give up a little bit. But hey, it's whatever makes you happy. And that's the great thing about fly fishing in general and spey casting specifically is there's so many aspects of it that you can find appealing and really get into.
For sure.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, it's all micro like hobbies within it. Casting. Some people just get into that, fly tying. You can really kind of just sweat whatever you want. But yeah. Okay, why don't we talk a little bit about your kind of fishing this year? Like, have you been hitting the river a lot? I mean, I know I'm sure you're very busy, but how's the fishing life been for you?
I got 4 kids, and they are 8, 6, 4, and 2, so they're little kids. So this summer, the goal was basically to get them on the water as much as they wanted to be out there. So I did a lot of fishing with my kids, which was great. On the work side, I guide, but I guide when we need another guide. I don't, jump to the front of the line. So the amount of guiding I do varies from year to year, and it's not nearly as much as what the real guides we have working here do. From a personal standpoint, like me grabbing a rod and going fishing, hasn't been a ton of that, and I think that just kind of goes with being at this point in life with the kids, right? You don't want to miss out on any of that stuff.
No, for sure. And yeah. But speaking of the lodge, I think we got to the place where we knew why you're guiding. So then how did the lodge come about? And then I think we've kind of encapsulated almost everything except for the podcast.
Yeah. So the lodge. So I told you guys I was doing some guest instruction and hosting trips. So basically, you have a fly shop, you teach people how to cast. Now they want to go and explore the world. And, you have relationships with different lodges and you take groups there. And one of my clients often become friends. One of my long-term clients, he'd done some trips with me, and he did a trip to Terrace. And the gentleman who was the guide there, who had the business, that guy's a real passionate skier, and he just wanted to retire and ski all the time. So Malcolm's my partner, and Malcolm and Brad's the skier guy, Brad Zerip. And Malcolm worked out a deal to buy his business on a napkin in the boat after catching a big Chinook salmon. I was saying, one fish can change everything, right? So Malcolm caught this giant Chinook salmon and said, "Hey, how much do you want for this business?" And him and Brad hashed this deal out on a napkin, literally. And I happened to be sitting there, and he said, "Oh, you can help me with this?" And I was like, "Sure." Didn't really know what I was getting into, but then we had a guide business and a deal to utilize Brad's bed and breakfast for a couple of years, but we needed kind of a forever home, if you will. And the lodge property, has this great home water. It's, half an hour out of town upstream. It's got a boat launch, place to keep boats, good fishing all around. And it had a pretty neat story too, kind of in that same idea. The owners at the time had run the place for 27 years. It was a German family, and Dieter's the gentleman's name, Dieter and Ushi. And Dieter'd come to Canada and fished with a buddy of his on the Skeena and caught, I think it was a 68 pounder, but just a ginormous Chinook salmon. Said, "That's it. I'm moving to Canada." Wow. So he came here and bought this 10-acre chunk of land on the river and turned it into a fishing lodge over, like I say, 3 decades. So us purchasing it and, moving our business to this location was kind of a continuation of that, which is pretty neat. You can build a big fancy looking lodge in a cool spot with a nice view, but there's something about, I think, when you have 3 decades of people fishing there, just the spirit of the place, right, is just undeniable. So yeah, it's a cool spot on the Skeena. We're very lucky to have it. And we have a great group of guests that visit us every year, from all over the world, different ability levels. and they all just really love trying to catch a really nice fish on the lower Skeena.
That's cool. If you could like say in like a, you know, like a sentence, like what makes the place special, how it's different from other places, you know, like how would you describe, what would you say? How'd you describe
I think
that?
I think it's a really authentic place, and we have a tremendous staff, and we have a lot of consistency amongst our staff, meaning, you know, we don't have a lot of turnover, right? From one year to the next, it's the same people. And I think guests really like that. And, you know, that just goes back to this idea of authentic hospitality, right? It's not pretentious.
Yep.
And, you know, we have people from all walks of life. We get folks who roll in on a private jet, and we have guys who are construction workers. And, you know, everyone's just the same, sitting around the same table, sometimes in waiters, waiting to go fishing.
Yeah, that's cool, man. That's cool. Do you have any like one story from over the years that just sticks with you from a guiding, like a trip with somebody up at the lodge, like something that you were just like you come back to time and time again?
Man, I tell the Bob Johnson story a lot. It's poor Bob. It's out there. So Bob is one of our favorite guests. Bob's a buddy now, and Bob fished with me on the Squamish, and I remember it was Valentine's Day, and Bob was fishing for winter steelhead. He'd never done it before, and sorry, Bob. Some people pick up casting really quick. Bob was not that guy. It was it was going to be a process for him. But on his first day, he rolled out that line, and when the current made it straight, and the current will fix every cast eventually. When the current straightened it out, there was like a 15, 17 pound chrome bright Squamish steelhead on the end of it, jumping around, and it eventually ran down the rapid. Bob clamped down on the reel, tried really, really hard to stop that fish, and almost broke his thumb, and the fish was gone forever. I don't know if this was 5 seconds or 20 seconds, but it was fast. And from that point forward, Bob was a steelheader, and he put a lot of hours into landing the first one. Now, you know, over a decade later, Bob's, you know, one of the best anglers we have. You know, the guy's always catching fish. Bob's a great caster, but, you know, he's put a lot of days and a lot of hours into getting to that point. But this goes back to that whole thing. One fish changes everything. And that was just a really exceptional fish. And it didn't care that it wasn't a great cast. It just grabbed the fly and took off.
No, that's awesome, man. Yeah, it's such a cool, like, it's pretty neat to be able to see like you know, people over the years like actually watch people change and have that experience with people, you know. It's like it's an interesting job in that sense. Yeah, super neat. Okay, well, we obviously talked about a lot of stuff today so far. I mean, like we were jumping around because there's just so much to talk about, and I feel like we're gonna have to do another show with you at some point because you got a lot of knowledge, fishing knowledge up there. But yeah, I mean, like pretty cool, like, you know, fishing life. Really cool place to grow up fishing. Obviously, in the Bucket Podcast is going to be really cool, and it already is. Skeena obviously is a beautiful place. It's been really cool to chat. I mean, we do have 5 more questions that we ask every guest at the end of every show. They're called Mitchie's Fishies 5, and they're kind of just 5 more general questions. But I'm really curious to hear kind of where you go with them. So the first question of Mitch's Fishies 5 is, what is your favorite fish and why? If you had a favorite fish.
I feel like I know the answer, but
Yeah.
Tough call. I'm gonna go with Chinook salmon. I'll tell you why.
Oh,
I talked
okay.
about it
never
before.
mind.
Why Chinook?
Okay, so steelhead, steelhead are beautiful. Everyone wants to catch a steelhead. Steelhead, what's frustrating about them is a lot of times they'll grab your fly at the end of the swing, so you got to be patient. They come out of shallow water.
Mm-hmm.
Cool thing about Chinook is they're in heavier water, and sometimes it's like they see your fly coming. The fly hits the surface, and they're just on it. And a steelhead take feels like a trout bite, right? There's a variety of steelhead takes, but generally speaking, you're like, oh, something's happening. Chinook isn't like that. The fly often stops. You feel the head shakes, and then all heck breaks loose. Or the fish just, like I say, sees the fly coming, grabs it, and swims off. And the neat thing about Chinook is just how quickly you can go from, 0 to running out of line. And they come at the start of the swing, right? So you don't have to be patient to the end of the swing. So it's a good match for a guy that wants to cast. They sit a long ways out, so you can throw it as far as you can. You can fish the biggest fly that you can chuck, and there's only so many places you can catch a nice bright chrome Chinook salmon in a river. So yeah, I got to give it to Chinook this time. or king salmon if you
I
have
like that's a
American
cool
listeners.
answer, man. It's super cool. Yeah, Chinook salmon. King salmon, yes. We've talked a little bit about kings on the show. That's cool. I like that. Okay, number 2, if you could fish anywhere in the world right now, where would you go and why? Assuming it's going to be like incredible fishing.
Well, I got to say I love fishing out front here on the Skeena with my kids, and currently it'd be tough to beat that. But if I was going on a vacation somewhere, and someone else was paying the bills, Norway for big Atlantic salmon.
Norway, okay, yeah. That's a good answer. Yeah, I can dig that. Have you fished Atlantic salmon before, I imagine?
Only once in Newfoundland in a river called oh man, I can't remember. It's in Corner Brook. I should know this. Anyways, it'll come to me as soon as the show's over.
Not the Humber, right? That's not the
Humber. Yes, the Humber. It was the Humber. So Jeff Pureway Rod Company, good buddy of mine. He's from Corner Brook, and
nice.
I fished with him. Sick. Yeah, for Atlantic salmon. And we fished with a friend of his who's unfortunately now passed away, a legendary Canadian fly tyer named Rob Solo.
Oh, cool. That's really cool. Wow, that's a heck of a trip. I want to hit the Humber so bad. It looks awesome, man. I'm actually going Atlantic salmon fishing, not to like turn this into like a give Mitch tips thing, but like I'm going Atlantic salmon fishing in Scotland in a few weeks. If you had like 2 tips for a spey casting guy that's going to try to catch an Atlantic salmon, any quick hitters that I should keep in mind when I'm out there?
I got 2 for you. One, you got to believe. Every cast fishes, right? You got to believe. And the second kind of goes with that, and that's, anything that doesn't feel consistent with not being a fish should be viewed as the fish you want to catch, and treat it as such. Repeat the cast. But yeah, mindset is a big part of this game, and confidence is the best currency going. And you gotta step into the river with loving the fly that's on the end of your line and thinking the water in front of you looks really good.
Oh, I love that tip. That's really good. I mean, that's like, honestly, like you got to believe, and I feel like that's so true for like steelhead and stuff too. Like anytime we go at steelheading, it's like I just try to switch that on in my brain. Like, no, there's fish here for sure. And oftentimes that's when I do, see or hook a fish. So yeah, that's good advice. Okay, I'm gonna keep that in mind. I'm probably still not gonna catch anything, but I'm gonna try. No, I see. I'm already messing up.
You're already
I'm already
wrong.
having
You
a
have
bad
to believe.
Oh man. Okay, number three. What is one of your best or favorite fishing memories from all time?
I gotta think about that one. I got a bunch, but I'm gonna go with my brother catching this ginormous sea run cutthroat on the Stave River with my dad when we were kids. That was, I feel like that fish was like 30 inches long, but I know it wasn't. But it was all of 2 feet, which is kind of like a 30-pound steelhead for a sea run cutthroat. So yeah, that was pretty cool. My brother Steve.
Oh man, that's a great story. Yeah, and I mean, like that's just like kind of memories that stick with you, like. And I love when you're a kid, everything's, you're like, these fish are huge, but it's probably like just a little guy, but that's cool. I like that. Okay. Number 4 is, why do you fly fish? Why do you keep going back out?
I think it's really like a simple answer. And that's, if you don't know unless you go, and it's fun to roll the dice and see what's going to happen. Right. And there's the whole anticipation component. You talked about rod building, you talked about people who tie flies, in preparation for your trip, whether it's a lodge stay or, just fishing your local stock lake, it doesn't matter what you're into. The anticipation of knowing that you're going fishing this weekend or today after work or, 2 months from now, that gets you through. And yes, it's just something about just getting out there and seeing is really, I think, addicting.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, no, it makes sense. Okay, number 5, Mitchie's Fishies 5, is, what fly pattern represents you best and why? If you were a fly, what would you be?
That's a great question. Egg sucking leech. No. Let's go with. I'm gonna go with like a coho blue. I don't know why. I just always like that fly. So this is a coho streamer with blue and chartreuse on it.
And what about that fly? Like, why that one?
I always had good luck with that fly, and I always thought that fly looked like it was going to be successful somewhere or another.
That's a nice fly. Yeah, I'm looking at pictures of it right now. Is it kind of like this one here? If my
Yeah,
camera does it, that kind of
that's
one.
exactly
Is that
it.
the
No,
one?
you got it right there. That's the
Nice.
one.
I like that. I like that. We've never had that one on the show before. That's definitely an original answer. That's super cool. Sweet. I mean, that's Mitch's Fishies 5, Brian, and I mean, like that's kind of the show. Like, I mean, like I think the thing is like there's so much for us to talk about in general, and like we got to have you on again just to talk about one thing specifically. It's cool to get like an overview of sort of your fishing life and all of that stuff, but yeah, you're a wealth of knowledge, and you're in one of the most beautiful places on earth. So, but yeah, I mean, it was great to meet you today, and thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Hey, and you know what? Another idea is, I don't know how mobile you guys are, but maybe one day you come out here and do an episode on site.
Oh, brother, I mean, we're mobile. We are mobile, especially with an offer like
We
that.
can mobilize for that.
Yes.
We can mobilize, no problem.
Yeah, that would be awesome, and then we don't have to worry about internets and all kinds of stuff like that. We can just do it live, which would be really cool. But yeah, man, thank you again. Like, it was really cool to get to meet and chat a little bit about your slice of fly fishing in the world.
Right on, guys. Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I have to tell you, when I got into the podcasting thing, which was kind of not anything I planned to do, it was just sort of something that came along, and Dave asked me about it. I did a little bit of research, just trying to see what else was out there. And your format's really unique, right? There's a lot of podcasts that are kind of one-on-one guests, but to have multiple hosts, and the way you guys do it with the banter back and forth, it's an enjoyable listen. So keep up the good work.
Oh, thanks, man. That means a lot. I really appreciate that. Yeah, that's cool.
Speaking of podcasts and everything about you, so this is kind of shameless promotion time. So where can people find the show? If people want to come to your lodge, or book you as a guest instructor, because I think that's a really cool idea. How can people find you, the lodge, and the podcast?
Yeah, you bet. So the lodge is www.skeenaspey.com. And the podcast is inthebucketpodcast.com, part of the Wet Fly Swing feed.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, we'll put like links to all that stuff in the show notes as well. But yeah, super cool, man. Yeah. All right, cool, Brian. We won't take any more of your time. We know you're busy, and but yeah, thank you so much for coming on, man. And until next time.
Right on. Appreciate your time, guys.
And there's Brian, nice fellow. And yes, like we said earlier, there's lots of stuff we could do. We could talk to Brian about. I think we kind of pinged all over the place because he's got so much to his fly fishing life, and also he's clearly got a lot of knowledge to share and a lot of passion to share. That it's sort of just shooting out in all kinds of directions. But
I think we did an okay job of at least following the timeline of his life.
I think so. But yeah. I really like chatting with Brian. Yeah, super nice guy. And he said we should go out to the Skeena. We got to find a way to make that happen.
Yeah, we're going to do that.
That would be sick. Record Riverside on the Skeena. I mean, come on. Brother.
I would do the winter. I would do the winter run. I'd be happy to do the winter run.
That'd be so cool.
And actually, you know what, man? Maybe we could go skiing after too.
Well, geez.
Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be fun. I do like to shred the slopes.
Yeah.
I feel like that's where I would get
actual snow?
Seriously injured, though. On a real mountain.
Wow. You'd be fine, man. You're a good skier.
I kind of did shred some gnar.
Yeah, dude,
recently.
You're shredding gnar a lot. Man, coming from the East Coast when you're just trying to grind ice, literally.
Right. Yeah.
It's pretty awesome when you actually get to ski on snow.
Yeah, it's not really skiing. It's more just sliding.
Yeah. Here? Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or in like Ottawa, yeah.
Yeah.
That's Ottawa. Okay, Brian, thank you.
Yes. Great chat.
Fabulous chat. Very nice to meet you. And yeah, let's talk about Oregon because that's what you just did. And I'm curious about all of what happened there.
Yeah.
Do you think we'll do a whole show about Oregon?
I think it might be. I was going to say it might be fun to do a whole show with like maybe like, how we did with Kate and Scott, like maybe with like
a couple peeps. Might
be cool to do with Mac and Peyton.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Because they're rad, or like literally anybody on that trip. Ben.
Yeah.
David Gravette. Anybody.
Yeah, well, we should just maybe have some of these people on just to talk about their fly lives in general. But yeah, that'd be cool to do a little Oregon recap trip.
Yeah, I would love to. But really quickly, we were fishing Central Oregon, and Reddington's got some new rods coming out in 2025. I'm not really going to say what they are, but they're going to be replacing some rods that are, let's say, aging in their lineup.
Okay.
And we got to try out one reel that was really cool as well. but that won't be coming out for like almost a year and a half, 2 years. So, but it's pretty much done. It's just the way the manufacturing schedule.
Okay, wait.
goes.
You tell me what the rods and reels are right now, and I'll edit it out. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Those are the innovations. Oh my god, I can't even believe it.
It's cool because Brandon. It's one thing to like fish new stuff and like have a product like a sales rep tell you about it.
Right.
It's really cool because
Have the design.
Brandon who is the new lead rod designer for Reddington. He's a mechanical engineer, and then he works closely with Clay, who is the graphic designer. So they both work in tandem to bring this thing to life.
Yeah.
And then Joe is actually the head reel designer for Farbank.
Right.
So he does the Sage reels, he does the Reddington reels.
That's cool.
And he was super cool. And I mean, everybody's
Spectrum,
cool, but like
Spectrum's an awesome reel.
I'd never
I
met
wonder if he designed that one.
Joe before, and or even really knew that he existed. And he was a very lovely guy.
Cool.
And, so it's cool, like, because I spent the last day on that Spring Creek with Demisha and like a little bit of crew. We split up, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And some people went to a different river, and we went to this one, and we had Joe and Brandon with us.
Oh.
And it was cool fishing side by side the designers and then having them ask you questions like for real time feedback.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, oh, I really like this rod, and they're like, but why?
Yeah.
And it was like I was like, it was cool thinking about why.
Thinking about what it is, because so much of it's just feeling.
Exactly. It's like, oh, I really like this rod. Why? I'm like, I don't know. It feels nice.
Yeah.
But then they would be like, okay, but how is it like when you cast this versus that? Like, does and
you can break down probably to them specifically, like it just, you could probably say things like the middle of it feels soft, and I like that, and they probably understand mechanically why.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they've thought about the construction of this thing in a different way.
Exactly, yeah.
So
but I think everyone should be pretty stoked for these new rods. They're going to be, especially the one that's coming out this spring in April. It's going to be a higher end rod that's more affordable.
Okay.
So it's going to be, they last year I think they probably they went ham on the kit rods. Like the Wrangler's an awesome rod, the original. And of course, all the field kits.
Yeah.
Well, now they're like looking at the top end of their line, like the Crux and stuff, and figuring out how they can, reimagine those. And I think people are going to be pretty stoked on those rods. I was really impressed. I've cast a lot of rods in my life.
Yeah.
And especially because we're also doing what we do, but also working at fly shops over the years, some different brands and stuff. I was really stoked on these rods.
That's awesome.
I think everybody was pretty much.
And then the trip overall, the fishing was great.
Oh my God, Central Oregon. If you live in Central Oregon, never leave.
Like there's so many trout.
Yeah, well, not just the trout. There's it's the natural beauty is wild.
Of course.
Dude. And Oregon, I have a picture in my mind of Oregon because the first time I went, I was on the coast, right? So it was like Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
Almost like rainforest vibes. I was soaked every day in rain, except for Central Oregon, is all desert for the most part. And so it's like
weird,
really beautiful. It looked a lot like Craig, Montana. Like where we were in Craig.
Yeah.
It looked a lot like that. Like if you look, the trees don't have hills; they have brush. They have, it's like rocky. It's plains. But then it's like these dude. I had to leave the river on the Spring Creek day because my legs were numb. It was that cold, like cold, crisp, clear, beautiful water. The Deschutes obviously is gorgeous.
Some of the videos are just the clearest water I've ever seen. In that one lake you guys were fishing.
Oh yeah,
Stillwater.
So that lake was like part of the headwaters of the Deschutes, I think. Okay. And like it was flooded, like the forest was flooded and dammed essentially. So
you're like, there's so much structure
going over this like log graveyard. At first it was kind of unnerving because I was, David from Very Good Fly Fishing and I shared a boat, and we were like, oh man, we're gonna hit some logs for sure.
Yeah. But it's just because the water's so clear. And yes, they're sticking out of the water and you have to avoid them. But like the fishing was amazing. Yeah, because it's just fish heaven. Clear, cold, amazing,
tons
pristine
of food,
water, and a ton of shelter.
Ton of food, ton of shelter, and David and I, we kind of like were the slowest. We were taking pictures and just fucking around. Yeah. And we were kind of the slowest boat to get to like the fishing grounds, if you will.
Yeah.
And everybody else had their little spot set up. And then we were like, I don't know where to go. And then all of a sudden, all these fish started rising around us. And we both looked at each other. We're like, well, how about we're like right here? And so we started that way, and it was cool. Like we kind of like got on fish pretty quickly. And then I think most people did pretty well. That ended up being, once you figured out what was going on. And for us, that was balanced leeches.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, I mean, that makes sense.
For us, it was like, damselfly pattern, strip
Sure.
through really slowly.
Mm-hmm. It's like fishing the Bing, baby.
And then as the day went on, the wind kicked up and they started chasing flies a lot faster. It was fun though.
It's cool.
The Spring Creek day was like my favorite day though. It's hard to pick a favorite day, but that was really, 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 really special. But yeah, Central Oregon, like
What made the Spring Creek kind of stand out for you?
Well, we just don't get to fish Spring Creeks,
Mm-hmm.
you and I, like in this part of the world. Obviously when we showed up, just looking at that water, it was insane.
Yeah, so clear. You sent me a picture, and I was like, I could see the fish in the photo.
I know.
I was quite a ways back, and it was like, there's a bunch of fish right there.
I was like, are those fish? I was like, oh, they are fish. And
Yeah.
then, and also just the day was amazing. Like,
Yeah.
the day started with a big caddisfly hatch, then it moved on to like PMDs,
Cool.
and then it moved on to like midges. So we were on dries all day.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Which was like, that was cool. And obviously you see them rising, you're sight fishing to them, like we're spotting for each other, if you couldn't see the fish. It's like, oh, it landed 10 feet in front of it. Oh yeah, no, he's coming to it. Oh, refusal, change your fly. It was like fun.
Yeah.
It was really, really, really fun.
That's neat. Yeah. Well, we should do a show about that and get into it more, but
overall, great
Cool.
trip. A lot of really great people. Max McKenna, who we met in Denver, it was her 30th birthday, so I got to celebrate her birthday. So happy birthday, Mac! And it was just a great time.
Fun.
Mm-hmm.
Well, awesome. Okay, well, keep a lookout for that because I'm sure we'll do a show on that. But
Definitely do a show on that, and then the content will all come out in April when the rods get released. So yeah,
sick.
Little
There you
sneak
go.
peek
There you
for
go.
everybody.
Well, there we go. That is another episode, and thank you so much for listening, Brian. Thank you for coming on the show, and Aldo, welcome home.
Thank you. R.I.P. Colin.
Yes. Recipes, Colin, and everybody at home. Thank you for listening to the show. We much appreciate. And I'm off to Scotland. See you later.
Bye.
All right, that's it for me, Mitch. Aldo.
Bye, everybody.
All right, take care.
Comb your hair. Comment.